I'd like to begin as usual by wishing you all a good morning or good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it happens to be, wherever you find yourself on whichever day. And as usual, we will begin with the prayers for Refuge and Bodhichitta. So I'd like to ask you to please recite these prayers with faith and devotion. Oh, 1 second. All the things that one needs to get together to do a class over Zoom. Whoops, something went wrong. Well, we're having a slight technical difficulty. I'll try that again. Now it is working. So please recite these prayers with faith and devotion. O sanje chodan soge chodam la chancho bardo dane chapsam che dagi chenyen gi besanam gi Drola penjer sanje drobar sho sanje chodam soge chodam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyen gi besanam gi Drola penjer sanje drobar sho sanje chodam soge chodam la Chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyengi besunamgi Drola penjer sanje drobar sho Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Semjen tamje dewa dan dewe judan dambal juji donga dan donga ji judan rawa juji donga mebe dewa tamba dan min rawa juji yere chadan nitan rawa danyon chambola nebo juji. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly in my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now please think to yourselves that we need to free all sentient beings with whom we've all had close connections in the past and upon whom we depend for our lives and everything now. Think to yourselves that we must repay that kindness by bringing them to the state of lasting happiness, and the only state of truly lasting happiness is the state of Buddhahood. And so in order to do so, in order to bring them to Buddhahood, we need to reach Buddhahood ourselves, which means that we need to meditate, and in order to meditate, we need to study. So think to yourselves that you're listening today with this motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters of Youthful Play, we are discussing the 8th area, the teachings on absorption. This chapter, basically there's the actual chapter and then there's the conclusion to the entire treatise. So in the actual chapter, there are 3 parts: the explanations of the dhyanas and formless, the classifications of samadhi, and the explanation of the qualities supported by samadhi. So we are still speaking about the first of these, the explanation of the dhyanas and the formless. And this has 2 topics, the individual explanations and understanding them in common. And so again, we're speaking about the second of these, understanding them in common, which has 6 topics: examining their essence, identifying the branches of dhyana, the manners in which absorptions are attained, what support manifests them, and what sphere they focus on. And 6th is identifying what discards the afflictions. So we are on the 4th of these, what support manifests them. In other words, what sort of a body do you need to have in order to produce these meditations? What sort of a body in which realm? But before we get into that, there was a question that came in overnight, or actually this morning, my morning. And so I'll respond to the question first. And so the question reads, for the first noble truth, 4 aspects are given, but not all 4 seem to point exclusively to suffering. So what are the 4 aspects? It's permanent, suffering, empty, and selfish, right? These are the 4 aspects. So we all experience suffering and unsatisfactoriness. That is the 3 types of suffering in various degrees of intensity. So that is clearly suffering. Impermanence causes suffering if not accepted and seems the base for most of our struggles and pains, pointing to the cause. Well, actually, as it describes here, impermanence is like you have because it's not permanent, it's not lasting, because it is dependent upon conditions. And because it is dependent upon conditions, it is therefore just inherently a little bit painful. So that's what it says in the text. But the other 2 aspects, and this is where the real question is, the other 2 aspects of suffering, empty and no self, seem to be pointing to the truth of cessation and path, not just to suffering. So how does this work? When we have 4 aspects of the truth of suffering, then how is it that we're talking about these aspects that really point to, especially to the truth of cessation? So how is that? Well, so you have to think about what they are and what they are replying to, what kind of problem we have and what these aspects are the antidote to. So these are the aspects of the truth of suffering, which means that they are like antidotes for problems that are suffering. The aspects of the truth of suffering are not themselves suffering when you understand them, because they're undefiled. When you understand the aspects of the truth of suffering, that they don't produce further suffering, they don't cause the afflictions to increase and promote any activity. So they're not themselves suffering, the aspects of the truth of suffering. But they're antidotes. And so the first one, the truth, the aspect of suffering, is the antidote towards the idea that things are permanent. The second, the antidote of suffering, is the idea that things are pleasurable or blissful or comfortable. We might think that our lifestyle for example, we might think that our lifestyle in a developed country, even in developing countries in a modern era, is like really comfortable. but but actually it is by nature suffering. And then the third and the fourth, empty and selfless. So what is emptiness? Well, the empty here means that what it says in the text here, and it's described backward, this is discussed in the 13th stanza of the 7th area, where it says that emptiness means that because it is incompatible with the idea of mine. So the idea of things being mine is painful. So seeing that they're empty means that you see that there's no mine. There's nothing that is mine. There is no, and so in that way it is, it's incompatible with that view. So it is the antidote for that idea of there being mine. So my body, my mind, my things, my possessions, my friends, my, all that idea of my, it's the antidote for that, as described in the foundation vehicle. It's also like, it's also said like casting off a load or throwing down a load, releasing yourself of a burden. You no longer have this burden. If you have I mean, you all know what it's like if you're carrying suitcases with too much of your own junk from one place to another. You know how painful that is in the short term as you're going up to the either the train station or the ticket counter at the airport, or hefting it in the back of a car, or whatever you're doing with a heavy suitcase. You've got too much mind and it's a burden. But it's even more than just that kind of gross sort of example of it. It's the idea of their things being mine. You've got worries, things you have to take care of. And it's, but the fundamental thing is that it's not actually, it doesn't actually fit with the way things are. How can I mean, you think that something is mine. You think this body is mine. Well, what is this body? It's just all these separate particles. Some more liquidy, some more mushy, some sort of solid, but it's just kind of all these particle things. So what is it that you're saying mine? What is the body that you're saying mine? There isn't any body to be mine on the route, what we relatively call the body. And the particles, how can we say that they're mine when they're always changing in every moment and moment? Even you know, the cells in our body are being exchanged according to science every few years. Sometimes they say 3, sometimes they say 7. I don't know which it really is, but basically everything. So there's nothing there to be mine. So the aspect is seeing that there is that there's nothing that's mine, and therefore it is empty. And then the aspect of selfless is like saying that there's no me. Not only is there no mine, there's no me. Not only is the body and the mind and so forth not mine, there's no me in it either. But we have this sense of a me, and it can either be learned, such as ideas of a soul or so forth, or it can be the innate, the causal, the instinctive idea of the instinctive feeling that there must be a me. But that idea that there's a me is incongruent. It conflicts with how things actually are. So to realize that things are selfless is the antidote for that type of suffering, of clinging to a me. And so in this way, when we look at the aspects, what we're doing is we're looking in particularly in the first 2 truths, because what they're focusing on are defiled phenomena. We're looking at things in terms of the aspects are, in a sense, the antidotes for the misconceptions that we have. So that's the main difference. So that's a very good question. It's something that's important to think about. These 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths are really quite important to understand. They come up a lot in the sutra teachings. So maybe in the Tibetan tradition, where we don't necessarily base particularly a lot of our practical teachings on the sutra tradition, they're less familiar to people, but they're important to study and understand. There's a lot to be learned from understanding them. Okay, so that is that. And I think that means that we are now ready to go into this section on the what supports the dhyanas. What supports the dhyanas and the formless meditations. So here we have these, we're on the section on page, what page is it in the book? Page 560, towards the bottom of page 560. So what support manifests them? So the support would be the body in whichever level, whichever realm, and them refers to the form and formless samadhis, and this has 2 points. The first is the general. The dhyanas and formless are on their own or lower support, no use for no use for lower. So the dhyana meditations and formless are on either a support of their own level or one of a lower level. So if you are able to do the fourth dhyana, for example, it can be done on the support of the fourth level, if you're in the fourth level of formless, if you're in that realm. Or it can be done in the third, second, or first level of formless, or in the desire realm. But it can't be done on a higher realm. It can't be done, or it isn't done on the lower support, it isn't used on a higher support. It isn't done on like the levels of the formless realm. Why is that? Because once you've reached the formless realm, you've got no need for the jhanas. They're really coarse in comparison to the very subtle and fine formless meditation. So there's no use for them on the lower levels. So as it says in the commentary, the dhyanas and the peak and the other formless absorptions, the peak and the other formless absorptions means infinite consciousness, infinite space, and nothingness, and the peak, which is also called neither conception nor non-conception. So these absorptions are manifested on the support of their own level or on lower levels down to desire. So that means that you can, when you're in desire, you can basically do anything that's higher. When you're unborn in the higher level, the absorption of the lower level is not manifested. Why is that? Because there's absolutely no use for it. You don't need the substance, that is the nature of the lower absorption. Producing the samadhi of the lower has the function of producing the full ripening of the lower. So when you're doing the meditation, as we discussed in the fourth chapter, is karma. And it produces the full ripening. If you do the first jhana, it produces the full ripening of being reborn in the first and the three abodes of the first level of form. So there's no need for that when you have already achieved, say, the second or higher, the second jhana or higher. But the higher level has transcended the full ripening of the lower because the samadhi of the lower level is inferior. That's the basic point. You don't need it. It's not as good as what you already have. But there is one exception, and that exception is on the peak of existence. On peak, they manifest nothingness of nobles, then extinguish defilements. So on the peak of existence, the noble beings do manifest the undefiled sense base or meditation of nothingness, which is the third of the four levels of formless. And then they use that to extinguish the defilements of the peak of existence. And so why is it that they do that? Why don't they do the undefiled on the peak of existence? It's because there is no peak, undefiled on the peak of existence. So as it says in the commentary, that was in general, but there is an exception. When born on the peak, they, that is noble beings, manifest the undefiled sense base of nothingness of nobles. And then they extinguish defilements of the peak of existence because there is no undefiled path on the peak, and the undefiled sense base of nothingness is close to the peak. So on the peak of existence, the undefiled, because it's the highest level of existence, it can't be its own antidote. And so therefore the undefiled would be its antidote, but it can't on that level. So you have to go down to the next lower level, the level of nothingness. So this is for people who are born in the peak of existence, like those, what do we say? The people who have the successive results, who go from the non-returners, who go from the desire realm to the first level of form, then to the second level of form, and through each of the levels of existence until they get to the level of the peak of existence. And at that point, then they achieve the Vajra-like samadhi. Well, at that point, they don't do undefiled meditation on the peak or with the absorption of the peak. They do it with the absorption from the nothingness, which is the closest. So that's the fourth of these 6 sections of the understanding them in common. So now we've come to the fifth, which is what sphere they, that is the dhyanas and formless sense bases of the formless sense bases, focus on. And this is 3 points. So even this, we've got afflicted, pure, undefiled, and pure. So what do they focus on? So what afflicted dhyana focuses on? Enjoyment focuses on own existence. So when you have remember we have the 3 types. You've got concurrent with enjoyment, pure and undefiled. So concurrent with enjoyment is when you're you think that you're in jhana, then you think it's really good, and you're actually kind of out of it, but you're craving it. That's the afflicted. So absorptions with craving that are concurrent with enjoyment focus on their own level's existence, that is, defiled things. They're not focusing on the undefiled, they're focused on the defiled. So they don't focus on the lower level because they're detached from that. So for example, if you're on the fourth jhana, and you are just thinking, this is just the greatest, this is the bee's knees, it's the greatest samadhi. That's an afflicted, that's concurrent with enjoyment, that's afflicted. Now you're not looking at the third jhana because you think this is the greatest and the other ones are lower. You've transcended them, you're detached from them, you have no use for them anymore. They don't focus on the higher because they're completely separated from the higher by craving. In other words, the craving makes a total break between them and the higher realms. They don't focus on the undefiled either, because then it would follow that they were virtuous. What this is saying is that if you're focusing on the undefiled, then you're thinking about, things that are good and worthy. So if you want those, that's not actually craving. That's actually that's good. So that would be virtuous. And if it's virtuous, then it's not going to be afflicted. So that's what that's what that means. So that's with the afflicted jhanas and formless. So what about the pure and undefiled? All that exists is virtuous jhana sphere. So with the jhanas, all that exists, all phenomena, all that is composite and non-composite and exists, is the pure and undefiled virtuous jhana sphere or object. So sphere means like the object, like kind of the range of things that it can look at. And so it can look at all of the virtuous and unvirtuous phenomena on any level. It's not limited to its own or lower levels or anything like that. Then, but on the formless realm, it's a little bit different. The jhana and the pure, that is the virtuous defiled, and the undefiled have a different focus on the jhana on the formless than they do in jhana. So what the actual formless, that is the actual absorptions, not the preparations, the actual absorptions, what they focus on is defiled of lower is not the sphere of virtuous actual of formless. So when you are in the formless absorption, you do not look at the defiled phenomena of the lower phenomena. So that's whether you're talking about the virtuous actual, the virtuous actual would be the pure or the undefiled. So to read the commentary, the defiled of lower levels is not the sphere of the virtuous actual practices of formless, so that you don't look at the defiled phenomena. Their sphere is either the defiled or undefiled of their own and higher levels, and also the lower levels, undefiled paths of subsequent knowing. So the first part of this, the defiled is their sphere, the first clause, their sphere is either the defiled or undefiled of their own or higher level, so they can look at the defiled or undefiled of their own level. So if you're on the first level of formless, infinite consciousness, you can look at the defiled phenomena of your own level or of the three higher, infinite space, nothingness, and neither conception nor non-conception. But you can also look at the undefiled paths of subsequent knowing of the lower levels. So that means that you can also look at the subsequent knowing. So we've got the Dharma knowing and the subsequent knowing, right? Dharma knowing focuses on the desire realm. So you don't focus on that when you're in the formless realm because it's just too far away. You can't focus on it. But you can focus on the subsequent knowing, which will also means that you can also look at the undefiled on the levels of form, in addition to the levels of formless. Now here in the auto commentary and other commentaries as well, it doesn't say just the lower levels paths of subsequent knowing. It also says that which is compatible with them. When we say that which is compatible with them, that means that not just the knowing, but it also focuses on the forbearances of the undefiled forbearances and also the other mental factors and so forth that are associated with or concurrent with those jhanas on lower levels, with the undefiled jhanas on lower levels. So that is the fifth of the topics of understanding the form and formless absorptions in common. So now we've come to the sixth. Identifying what discards afflictions. Now here it's not talking about the specific antidote. What here refers to which levels of the jhanas and formless can discard afflictions. So in other words, if you're going to discard the afflictions, what level of, what type of meditation do you need to be in, or can you be in out of meditation? So here this has two topics: what discards what, and then the second is distinctions in discarding antidotes. So what discards what? So what the undefiled actual practice discards. The undefiled discard afflictions. So the undefiled form and formless discard afflictions. As it says, of the jhanas and formless absorptions that are pure, undefiled, and concurrent with enjoyment, of those three, the undefiled discard the afflictions of their own and higher levels. So for example, if you are on the level of the fourth jhana, you can discard the afflictions of the fourth jhana and of the four levels of formless. But the concurrent with enjoyment, but as the next line, which is basically a quote directly from the auto commentary, there's no need to mention the concurrent with enjoyment. Even the pure does not discard. So the pure actual practice of jhana cannot discard afflictions. And if that can't discard afflictions, then forget about the afflicted. There's no way the afflicted can possibly discard afflictions because it itself is afflicted. Forget about it. So when we're talking about the pure, why can't the pure discard afflictions? Well, because the preparations have detached one. That is, you've got the preparations to achieve the level. For example, if you're on the fourth jhana, then the preparations of the fourth jhana for the lower levels have already detached you from all the levels from desire up to the third level of jhana, and so they can't detach you from your own levels of afflictions. They've already those afflictions are gone. Because it is not their antidote, it does not discard the afflictions of its own level. It's not the antidote for its own levels of afflictions, the pure. Because they are greatly superior, it does not discard the higher levels of afflictions. So the higher levels of afflictions are just superior. If you're not even free of attachment for your own level, forget about eliminating attachment for the higher levels, is what it's basically saying, because they're even more subtle than the afflictions of your own level. We in the desire realm think that our afflictions are difficult and subtle. Well, sometimes they're not, but the really subtle level, the ones that we have to uproot, those are pretty subtle. We think they're subtle, but compared to the form realm, and then the form realm compared to the formless realm, they're just orders of magnitude subtler, more subtle. So that is why the pure does not discard, the pure practice does not discard. So so if you're doing it through a worldly path as opposed to the undefiled path, and how do you discard afflictions? So it's through the preparations. The second topic here says what the preparations discard, as do pure preparations do. So just as the undefiled discard afflictions, so do the pure preparations. So as do the undefiled actual practices of the form of jhanas, the pure preparations for higher levels of jhana and formless, discard the afflictions of the level below them too. The word too means that not unable is included within undefiled. So we have the preparations, right? The preparations for the first jhana are called not unable. They can be pure, that is defiled virtue, or they can be undefiled. When they're undefiled, they can discard the afflictions on any level. But when they're pure, they can only discard the level below them, the level of desire. And likewise, the preparations for the second, third, and fourth, and so forth. They can eliminate the afflictions of the level just below. So the preparations for the second jhana eliminate the afflictions of the first. The preparations for infinite consciousness, the first level of formless, eliminate the afflictions of the fourth dhyana. So they just do one right below them. So therefore, the defiled actual practices do not discard any afflictions at all, because the lower levels have already been discarded and they cannot discard the afflictions of their own and higher levels. So now here we have questions. Well, what are these different types? What are the antidotes like? And so here we're talking about the distinction. We have this section on discarding distinctions and the discarding antidote. So this has two topics: the distinctions of the preparations and then identifying special dhyana. So the distinctions of their preparations, this has two topics: the classifications and their essences and the feelings they are concurrent with. So as far as the essences go, for those there are 8 preparations. That means for each of for those levels of the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless, 8 levels, for those 8 actual, there are 8 preparations, the preparation for each of those levels. In the commentary it says, for entering those 8 actual practices, there are also 8 preparations, so 1 for each level. As far as the manner of entering absorption, each of the preparations has 7 aspects through one can enter through absorption. So basically there are 7 steps that you go through. Remember, we have the 9 sets of meditation discards for each of the levels. We had the little graphics that I did in a couple chapters ago. I don't know if they stick in your mind. So you've got the what do we say? We've got the 9 levels, the greater of greater down to the lesser of lesser. So that'd be 9 different levels of, or 9 different scales or intensities of the afflictions on each level. And so you go through 7 different steps to eliminate them. Now, these 7 different steps actually come from Atisha's teachings on Abhidharma, and they're quoted in the Chim Abhidharma. So there's a good description there if you'd like to take a look at that. It's very clear in that text. So of these 7, the first of them is attention on thorough knowledge of the characteristics. What this means is that you are looking at the lower level, the characteristics of the lower level, and you are seeing that life is short there. In comparison to the form realm, human life is just laughably short. Or it's full of suffering. Like in the human realm, you have all sorts of disease and strife and conflict. And in the form realm, you don't. And so, and it's also looking at the distinctions of bodies and so forth, and just seeing that it's actually everything in the lower level is coarse compared to what is so much subtler, finer, smoother, easier on the higher level. So that's the thorough knowledge of the characteristics. And then I just want to check. I want to make sure that I'm getting these right as I explain them. Better not to rely too much on my memory, which might be a little bit faulty. Where did we go? Oh, yeah. I do have a note in the back here, which is actually, well, I might as well just show you that note. I think I can do that, can't I? This is the virtue of an ebook. Aha. But we better make the letters bigger. There's no way you're going to see them. Will this work? Oh, yeah. So here we got to go back up through the notes. Okay, so the top of this page, it says in the note number 335. In the first of these, that is, the first is called Attention on Thorough Knowledge of the Characteristics. One considers the lower realm coarse and the upper realm peaceful. So this is where, as I was just saying, you're looking at the lower level as just being unpleasant, not so good, and the upper level as being better. And then in the second, that is attention produced by interest, one discards the hindrances to generating the third. Now this means the third of the steps. So you look at this and then you see what's preventing me from overcoming the afflictions. And you eliminate those, and then you enter the third step. And that third is called attention on complete withdrawal. And so this is a stage where you actually discard the three greater sets of meditative discards. That would be like the greater, the middling greater, and the lesser greater. So those three steps, you discard them in that third step. And the next step, you're taking delight. Attention on taking delight. It's like the great joy of this. One feels joy and pleasure at having abandoned the greater discards. So you feel happy that you've done the three greater ones, and you're so excited about it, you're going to keep going, and you discard the three medium sets of discard. That would be the greater medium, the middling medium, and the lesser medium. So that's the fourth, attention on taking delight. So this is what you're focusing your attention on. Now, actually, here the word attention is this is what we use often in many Abhidharma translations, but it's actually like it's yilachepa. It's and the meaning actually is like the mental work that you're doing. It's often used for contemplation as well in the sutras and so forth. So attention is not quite the right. It's much broader than just attention. It also means like your contemplation, the work you're doing with your mind. So in the first is the engagement or the mental work of examination. So now you've gotten rid of the greater, the three greater and the three middling, and so you're only left with the three lesser, the greater, the greater, middling, and lesser. But they're pretty subtle, so you've got to actually kind of look and see where are they. So you're looking to say, what are they? Which ones remain? Then when you see them, then the sixth, the attention on the end of training or the contemplation of the end of training, you abandon the three lesser meditative discards. So those are the first six. So those are the first six which actually discard the antidotes. So that's the 6 steps, but there are 7 here. So let me go back there in just a moment. It takes a second. Oh, yeah. Okay. So for those, so here, so the last one is the attention on the result, or contemplating the result of the end of training. Now, this means that you're actually is on the actual practice. That is actually the actual first dhyana, for the first or second, whichever level you're going to. So you go through these 7 steps to eliminate the meditative discards. So they're not described in either the auto commentary or in the Ashommitra, but they are described in one of, I'm sorry, I don't remember which of them. They're in a text by Atisha and then mentioned in the Chim Abhidharma as well as in Mikya Dorje's. And so the note was based on the descriptions in Mikya Dorje's, but it is also described in the Chim Abhidharma, the ornament of Abhidharma that is already translated into English. So then there's the question, well, those are the preparations. You've got a set of preparation for each level, but each of the levels kind of has its own particular features. They have, in particular, they have different feelings, Some have pleasure and joy, pleasure and mental pleasure. Some just have pleasure. Some have neutral feelings. So do the preparations have the same feelings and essences? Can they be afflicted just the way the other ones, the way the actual bases are? Can they be undefiled? So now? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. I'm sorry about that. This is how it goes with technology. So let me get that text back up. Okay, so we're talking about the essences and feelings they are concurrent with. And so here, the general essence is that they're pure. That means that they're defiled virtue. The preparations are defiled virtue. They are not, they're not undefiled, with the exception of the first jhana, where they can be undefiled or they may be just pure. So on the first two jhanas, there is a feeling of joy. So when you're on the first two jhanas, you've got the feeling of joy. So when you're on the preparations for those two jhanas, you feel joy. On the third jhana, there is pleasure. And on the fourth, there is neutral. So do the preparations have similar feelings, you ask? They do not. The preparations, are pure in essence. That means they are defiled virtue. They are not concurrent with enjoyment because they're not free of revulsion for the lower level. In other words, concurrent with enjoyment means that you're enjoying the pleasures of the upper level. Well, you haven't achieved it yet. You can't enjoy its pleasure yet. You're not free of the revulsion for the lower level. You're looking at the lower level with revulsion. And as you look on it with a revulsion, that's not like attachment to anything. It's like feeling, it's the opposite. And because they're a path that brings detachment. They're not pleasure and not pain. So that is the feelings on the preparations, are not pleasure and are not pain or suffering. They are only neutral. That means that you don't have pleasure when you're on the preparations. You have a neutral feeling. So why is it that you have a neutral feeling on the preparations? This is because of the preparations must be induced by exertion. You got to try. So they arise out of effort. You're working too hard to enjoy it. So the pervasion holds because the paths that arise without effort are concurrent with joy and pleasure. Now, in terms of the essence, whether they're defiled or pure or undefiled, the first is also noble, it says here. The first of the preparations, not unable, is not solely pure. It can also be noble or undefiled. The other levels cannot be undefiled. The other levels are necessarily pure. So, others' assertions, of course, there are other people who have other points about this. Some say threefold. So some people say that the level of not unable is threefold, that it can be undefiled, pure, and concurrent with enjoyment. So, as it says in the commentary, some say that not unable, the preparations for the first jhana can be all three, including concurrent with enjoyment. The reason is because it is clear, or according to Master Sanghabhadra, because it pursues and competes with the actual practice. There's this idea that it's kind of like it's really, what do you say? You probably enjoy it because you feel like this is going to get me what you're doing, so you can get attached to it, in other words, and because it's clear. Another explanation for this that's given in Yashomadra and in less degree, to less detail in the auto commentary, is that you actually can die and pass away and take rebirth in this level of the preparations. And so therefore, because the state of birth is necessarily defiled, if you're taking rebirth in that, then it must be with that level of preparation. Then you, if you're taking birth on the level of that preparation, then that would mean that you would have to be, at that moment, have to have an afflicted consciousness. So that is according to the Great Exposition tradition. It's a kind of a minor point. It doesn't seem to be so universally accepted. So now we've got this question. We've been talking about the preparations, and we've been talking about the special dhyana. Are they the same thing? What's the difference? So that's why we need to have the second section, the second part of this passage on identifying special dhyana. And this again has 4 points. In special dhyana, there's no considering. Well then, there's the term preparations and also the term special dhyana. Are these two the same or are they different, you ask? They're different. So when you talk about the preparations, that's a different thing than the special dhyana. Actually, in the Theravada Abhidharma, they talk about, the sutras talk about 4 dhyanas. And in their Abhidharma, in the Theravada Abhidharma, they talk about there being 5 dhyanas. And so they number them in the Tibetan, in the Great Exposition tradition, we number them as first, special, second, third, and fourth. So that the first, second, third, and fourth match what's described in the sutras. In the Abhidharma, they just go the first, then they call the special the second, and then what we call the second, they call the third, and then what we call the fourth, they call third, they call the fourth, and what we call the fourth, they call the fifth. So basically, they just count it as a separate one and count 5, as opposed to us, the way we do it, the way the Great Exposition does it, of saying there are 4 plus the special. So they're different. So the special is different than the preparations. The former, that is the preparations, is the path that brings detachment. And the special jhana is actually the detachment that you achieve. The special jhana is an actual practice in which there is no considering, but in which there is examining. So in the first jhana, you have the five branches of considering, examining, pleasure, joy, and samadhi. So if you eliminate the considering, and then you're just left, then you have the 4, the examining, pleasure, joy, and samadhi, and that is the jhana of the special jhana. It is the jhana that has an examining but no considering. Thus, the first jhana has a classifications as the mere actual practice that has both considering and examining, and the special that has examination only. There is no such distinction in the special and so forth. There is no classification of them as mere or special. So the first one, we've got mere and special, and the second, third, and fourth, there's no question of that. Probably because you've already discarded the considering, both considering and examining, so you can't distinguish them in that way. So now, when we talk about the special jhana, it's threefold. That means it can be all 3 types. As it says in the commentary, the special jhana, is threefold: concurrent with enjoyment, pure, that is the undefiled virtue, defiled virtue, and undefiled. So which feelings it has, neither pain nor pleasure. Because the special jhana is a difficult path that must be created by exertion, it has only neutral feeling that is neither pain nor pleasure. So on the special, I misspoke. I said that on the special jhana you have pleasure and joy. You don't. You only have neutral feeling. You'd have examining, neutral feeling, and samadhi. So there's only a neutral feeling. And again, it's the same reason as on the preparations. You're working. It takes enough work to do this that you can only have a neutral feeling. And has great Brahma as a result. So what is the result? As it says in the commentary, what is the particular result of the special jhana, you ask? It has the great Brahma realm as a result, because those who meditate on it will be reborn in great Brahma. In other words, by meditating on this, you will be reborn as great Brahma. You'll be reborn as as a Brahma in some world realm, as there's a Brahma in every world realm. Classifications of samadhi. So now we're talking about it. We've talked about all these different the different samadhis. We've identified what they are and what their characteristics are. So are there different ways that we can classify them than just talking about them in terms of the 4 jhanas and 4 formless and such? There are. And so this the classifications of samadhi here has 2 topics: classifying samadhi in 3, and classifying samadhi in 4. So you can either talk about dividing samadhi, that is a form and formless and such, into 3 classifications, or into 4. 3 categories or to 4 categories. So classifying samadhi in 3 categories has 3 topics. Classifying in terms of level, classifying in terms of path, and classifying in terms of the mode of engaging the object. So we'll talk about in terms of the level. So classifying in terms of the level says below, samadhi has considering, examining, above there is neither. So below, here this means below the special dhyana that we were just speaking about. So below the special dhyana, samadhi has considering. So on the levels of not unable and on the first dhyana, there's considering. and examining. Above, that is above the special dhyana, there's neither considering nor examining. And on the special dhyana itself, there is examining, but no considering. So the sutras teach that there are three types of samadhi. And this is a sutra that essentially, where, to paraphrase a bit, where the Buddha says, bhikshus, there are three types of samadhi. There is samadhi that has considering and examining, samadhi that has examining but no considering, and samadhi that has neither considering nor examining. So what are those three? Below it, that is on the first jhana and on not enable, there is samadhi that has considering and examining. So those two both have those two qualities. Above it, that means on the preparations for the second dhyana, up to all the preparation to the peak, there is samadhi that has neither considering nor examining. And then with the special dhyana itself, then that makes the third category. So that is classifying them in terms of their level. So now to classify them in terms of the path, this has 3 points. Identifying the essences of the three samadhis. The signless has aspects of peace, and emptiness engages selfless and emptiness. No wishing has all other aspects of the truth. So we've got 3 different types of samadhis, and you've probably heard them from another term that refers to some of these samadhis. We'll get to which ones. We talk about the gates of liberation. We've got the gate of liberation of emptiness, the gate of liberation of signlessness, the gate of liberation of emptiness, and the gate of liberation of no wishing, or wishlessness is sometimes translated. Now, these 3 terms are translated in a variety of different ways, and I, in fact, have translated them with different terms in other translations. In particular, signless is a little bit it's a not uncommon translation of it, but it's a little bit what do we say? A little bit deceptive. So the sutras speak of the 3 samadhis: the samadhi of emptiness, samadhi of no wishing, and the samadhi of signlessness. So these are the 3. So of these, the signless samadhi is a samadhi that is free of the 10 attributes. So the word that is translated as sign here, in Sanskrit it's nimitta, it's in Tibetan it's tsenma. Tsenma may be tingizin. So tsenma is like the attribute of something. When you look at something and you see that, oh, it is white, that white is an attribute. Or when you look at something and you say, if you look at a person and say male, female, non-binary, that is an attribute. When you look at anything you look at and you see some sort of aspect of it, then that is some sort of part of it that then you pick out separately. That would be an attribute. So, the signless, or the samadhi of no attributes, that's what I have more frequently translated it as in more recent translations, is a samadhi that is free of the 10 attributes. That is the 5 objects, that is seeing things as being form, sound, scent, taste, or touch, or the 4 characteristics of composites, that would mean as being arising, staying, aging or decaying, and perishing. And the male and female attributes, those are counted as 1, so that would make 10 different attributes. So looking at things, basically when you're looking at things and distinguishing them, the philosophical term is predication. When you say, it is that, it is that. This is also related, of course, to the third conception, the conception of the third aggregate, the aggregate of conception, which is basically predication. Perceiving attributes or grasping at attributes. So in the samadhi, you're not grasping any attributes. You're not saying it is this, it is that. You're just seeing. And it has, because you're not looking at any of those, it focuses on the non-composites and has aspects of peace. That is the 4 attributes, the 4 aspects of the truth of cessation, seeing things as peace. The 4 aspects are the peace, cessation, sublime and emancipation. So those are the 4 aspects of the truth of samadhi. So that's what this samadhi of signlessness or no attributes focuses on. The samadhi of emptiness is samadhi that for any focus, that it can be focusing on any different object or any different focus, engages only the two aspects of selfless and emptiness. So among the 16 aspects, it is engaging the two aspects of the truth of suffering, emptiness and selflessness, which we discussed before. That leaves 10 more aspects. So the samadhi of no wishing. This is a samadhi that focuses on composites and only have the aspects of the truths that create revulsion. So it is concurrent with all the other aspects of the truths than those 6 previously mentioned. So basically what this means is that when you have the samadhi of no more wishing, you're looking at something and saying, I don't really want that. Sometimes you're even feeling disgust with it. It talks about like revulsion or disgust for it. I don't want that. No impermanence for me. Forget about that. I don't want anything painful. And so you have this samadhi that's focusing on these. So the no wishing is samadhi that is basically realizing you don't want this stuff. And so it looks on the other 16 on the other 10 aspects, which are what for the truth of suffering. These are the first 2, impermanence and suffering. Then it's the 4 of the truth of origin, which are what? They're cause, condition, production, and cause, origin, production, and condition. And then also on the 4 of the truth of the path, the logical or reason, path, reasoning, causal deliverance, and what's the 4th? Terrible. Terrible, I should just be able to go right up. Anyways, all 4 of those. So it has the 10 remaining aspects. 4 of the truth of origin, 4 of the truth of path, and suffering's aspects of impermanence and suffering. Because the other 6 do not create revulsion, it does not have them. So it doesn't have the 4 of cessation because, you don't feel revulsion for cessation. It's like, that's peace. It's resplendent and so forth. You don't have revulsion for that. And similar, because the other 2 you've got, and this is related to the question that we opened up the class, you've got empty and selflessness. Those don't generate it either. Because why? Because they are similar. They're concordant or harmonious or similar to nirvana. So they don't create revulsion. So it doesn't have those aspects either. So that's, I think, part of what the questioner this morning was speaking about. So those are the 3. So what about 3? So basically what we're saying, the important thing is that the signless, or the lack of the samadhi of no attributes, is not seeing any attributes in any of the various defiled or undefiled phenomena. And therefore, it's those 2 aspects of emptiness and selflessness. You've got the emptiness. Excuse me. It's got the aspects of the signless. The no attributes has the aspects of the 4 aspects of the truth of cessation, not perceiving any attributes. Emptiness engages those 2 aspects of selflessness and emptiness, and then no wishing is basically saying, I don't want any of this stuff, feeling disgust and revulsion for all of the other 10 examples. Now, actually, the interesting one there, why are you feeling revulsion for the path, you might wonder? It's easy to see why you would feel revulsion for suffering and for origin. Why would you feel revulsion for the path? Well, it's because of that famous, or well, not famous, is that well-known, maybe it's not well-known enough, you might not have heard it, but it's a frequently quoted comparison of the path to a boat. When you take a boat across a river and then you want to go on your trip, you don't carry the boat with you. I mean, to portage a boat takes a lot of work. So you aren't going to haul the boat with you as you leave, and after you leave the river, you're going to leave the boat there by the side of the river and then go off on your merry way. Similarly, with the path, once you get beyond it, you don't need the path anymore. So therefore, you leave the path behind. And in that sense, it's like the path, of course, it's useful for a while, but in the end, you're going to discard it. And so that's why we talk about no wishing as also focusing on the path with revulsion or disgust. So now the classifications of their internal categories. They're pure or stainless. So these three samadhis, that is, I'll read the commentary. These three pure samadhis can be pure, that is worldly, or stainless, transworldly, that is transcendent, undefiled. So the pure are on the 11 levels of desire not unable, special dhyana, 4 dhyanas, and the 4 formless. So that's 11 levels. So it can be in so it can be on the in desirum and on the peak of existence, plus the 9 levels, the 9 levels that can also be undefiled. So that's 11 levels. And the stainless are on the 9 undefiled levels, which means that they're not on the level of desire nor on the level of peak, because there's no undefiled on either of those 2 levels. So that's the distinctions. And then when they are undefiled, they're given a different name. So examining their names, when they're stainless, they are 3 gates of liberation. So you've probably heard this term, the 3 gates of liberation. And that's what we're referring to, these 3 samadhis, when they are undefiled, not the worldly version. So for example, when we are meditating upon them as ordinary beings who have not yet achieved the levels of dhyana, we can meditate on them, but they aren't called the gates of liberation yet. When you achieve the undefiled, that is the undefiled, not unable, and so forth, then they become gates of liberation. So when these 3, the samadhi of signlessness or no attributes, of emptiness, and of no wishes, are stainless, they are gates to liberation. So they are the 3 stainless gates of liberation, of emptiness, no wishing, and signlessness. So these 3 are frequently discussed, and so this is what the terms are. So it's just important to keep in mind what we're talking about. So emptiness basically means that you're seeing everything through the lens of empty and selfless. No wishing means that you're seeing the defiled things of the world with the defiled things and composite things is what you want to eliminate. And signlessness is resting in the or attributeless is not seeing any attributes in anything and just resting in looking at the 4 aspects of the truth of cessation, at non-composites, which of course cannot have any attributes. So classifying in terms of the mode of engaging the object. So this has 2 topics, teaching the classification in general and explaining their features in detail. So there are 3 more samadhis called the empty of emptiness, etc. So the sutras also talk about 3 additional samadhis. Not only do you have the samadhi of emptiness, the samadhi of no attributes or signlessness, and the samadhi of no wishing, you've also got the samadhi of emptiness. So as it says in the commentary, also in the sutras, there are 3 more samadhis called 3 more samadhis, that is more in addition to the previous 3. And they are the samadhis called the emptiness of emptiness, etc., which means including the no wishing of no wishing and the signlessness of signlessness. Signlessness of signlessness. So what are we talking about with these? What is the emptiness of emptiness? So this has 5 points. The distinction of focus and aspect. The 2 focus on non-learners' aspects of empty and impermanent. So the emptiness of emptiness, the samadhi, the emptiness and emptiness, focuses on the the non-learner's aspect of emptiness, and the no wishing focuses on the non-learner's meditation on impermanence. The signlessness of signlessness focuses on peace, on the non-analyzed extinction or the non-analyzed cessation. So of those 3, the first 2 focus respectively on the non-learner's aspect of emptiness while viewing the empty. So this means that what happens, you're a non-learner, you're an arhat, in other words, you're resting in the samadhi of emptiness, the gate of liberation of emptiness. And then you arise from that and you focus on the aspect of emptiness. Not on the aspect of selflessness, but on the aspect of emptiness. So you focus on that. So it's basically after a non-learner arises from that samadhi, then they can focus on it with a new samadhi. Now it's a little different because this is going to be a defiled samadhi. It's not an undefiled samadhi. It's not samadhi, and it focuses on that aspect. And then the second one is the focus on the no wishing. So the focus on the non-learner's no wishing while viewing the aspect of the impermanent. In other words, the non-learner is doing the focus of no wishing, do the samadhi of no wishing, and they're seeing that all phenomena are so forth. And then at the end, they see they're focusing on the aspect of impermanent, and then they arise from the samadhi and they see that that samadhi of no wishing is itself impermanent. And so there's that no wishing for that no wishing. And as for the signlessness of signlessness, this means the samadhi of samadhi of signlessness, if I can speak this morning. The samadhi of signlessness means that you are focusing on the four aspects of the truth of cessation. Well, when a non-learner arises from them, focusing on the aspect of peace, the conditions for the continuation of signlessness are not met. So the signlessness of signlessness focuses on the non-analytic extinction or the attainment of non-analytic cessation. In other words, there's really nothing there that there's no sign that you can focus on the absence of the sign. And so it's just resting in the peace. That's why it's in peace and not in the question of cessation or the others, because it's not like looking at the cessation of impermanent versus permanent and so forth. And so it focuses on the aspect of peace only. And that it focuses on that. And it does not analyze it. It just rests, focusing on it. So it doesn't analyze it in any way. So of these three, the first two look at liberation itself. They're focusing on emptiness and selflessness. And the third focuses on its cessation and is thus diminished. So it is diminished liberation. So it's like looking at the cessation itself. It's just a little bit lesser. And so therefore, it is diminished liberation. Now, the distinctions of their essence, these three are solely defiled. They're not undefiled. In other words, you arise from the undefiled meditation and you look at the meditation you are doing, and that is defiled. And they're produced by humans, the distinctions of support by humans, it says. Where are they produced? You ask. They're only produced by humans, not by gods or others, so not in the form or formless realms, only by humans. And the distinction of individual is unshakable. So unshakable arhats, that means those arhats of high faculties who, of the highest faculties, those who have no danger of regressing, who have been the highest faculty for a long time. Who produces you, them you ask? They arise only for unshakable arhats, not for others. And so then what level are they on? Well, they are on all the levels except for the 7 preparations. So except for the latter 7 preparations, that is the preparations for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th jhana and the 4 levels of formless, I'm not having a good day with remembering terms, am I? Infinite consciousness, infinite space, nothingness, and neither conception nor for no conception. So they're not on the preparations for those levels. They are on the 11 levels previously explained. So that would be the desire, not enable, for form, desire, not enable, special dhyana, for form, and for formless. That's 18. That's 11. Okay, so we have got to the place where I had planned to get to this morning. So we will see this as a good place to stop. And I think there might be, is that a question here? Not really. Okay. Since there seem to be no questions from our Zoom audience right now, we will recite the dedication prayers. So please let us think to ourselves that we are that we are dedicating all the merit of teaching and listening the Dharma today to the benefit as representative of all the Dharma that we have ever done in the past or will do in the future or doing in the present, or that any other sentient being is doing or has done or will do. Let's dedicate this so that we can swiftly free all sentient beings from suffering of all kinds and bring them to the state of Buddhahood, and in particular to free this world from the scourges of plague, famine, and war. And in these days we have a lot, everyone knows about the epidemic that's going on. So we of course need to think about all those people who are suffering from the epidemic and who will continue, or who will suffer from the epidemic as it starts to spread again. We also need to think about all those people who have who are suffering from privation, and a lot of people in the developed countries. You know, we all know about rising unemployment and so forth. In other parts of the world, there are people who have just totally lost their income and have nothing to eat. Of course, this happens all at any given time. There are people who are starving anywhere, but in many places. But now there are people who are suffering even more, and so this is truly a difficult age in this world. And so we should dedicate this so that in the short term, all those beings who are suffering from conflict, who are suffering from climate change and fire and flood, and who are suffering from the effects of the epidemic and from famine and so forth, we should dedicate this so that all of those and any other suffering is swiftly relieved, and so that they all sentient beings achieve, meet spiritual masters, progress down the path, and achieve the result of Buddhahood without experiencing any obstacles on the way. So thinking in this way, let's please recite these dedications of merit. O sanam de tam je se bani tomne nye peranam pam chete che gana chi balong chubai Simpe tolero kunyorosho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Chancho semjo rinpoche make panam gejur jeje ba nyamba me baryang Gone gondu pelvar shom. So, thank you very much, and we will continue tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you all.